is Everyday Expertise, and I'm Angela. I'm here today with Kevin Giguere. He is the founder and CEO of Dragon Slumber, which is an indie video game company he started in 2013. His studio's latest release is the adventure simulation game Tech Support Error Unknown. Welcome.
Hi.
So how did you get started in game development?
So my first experience was actually when I was a teenager. We had a Pentium 75, a really old computer, and it was kind of at the start of the internet, so kind of very early on. I started with BASIC. QBasic specifically. I was making a bunch of text games, basically. There was one game that was a fighting game, which was all text, so you weren't moving a character. It was more like you choose which moves that you choose to perform, and you advance accordingly. Over time, I went to college, learned the craft of a programmer. I did a few years as a Flash programmer in the mid-2000s, making games on the internet for companies like Disney and Nickelodeon. And in 2012, by that time I was just a web programmer. I wasn't doing anything game related.
Right.
So I decided, you know what, I want to go back into games. I want to make games, and I started my first project, which was Arrowlight Core, a Japanese style RPG. I made my own engine in C#, and yeah, I've been in 2013. I officially registered the company, and I was on my way. Released that game in 2017. Released Astral Traveler the same year, which was a runner racing game, and now I'm really happy to release Tech Support Error Unknown, which is my third title.
So what made you decide to start your own company instead of, say, working for a established studio?
Sure. At the time, I was working with I had a full-time job, and it was more of a matter of balancing things out. I had worked for a studio in the past with the Flash games, but the reality is that at that time I was a programmer. I wasn't a game designer, so I didn't have the freedom to really create what I wanted to do. I didn't have that kind of luxury. I really want to have ownership over the stuff that I create, which is, great and kind of terrifying to some degree when people kind of experience it and they either love it or they hate it. But yeah, like for me, the creative process was so important. Like that's really at the core of what I like to do. I love to do game design, and when the project started for Arrowlight Core, it kind of was halfway between me creating an engine and designing a game. I knew that I wanted to make it into a full-blown commercial endeavor at that time. So yeah, I just took it, chipped away at it for what ended up being 4.5 years. Was supposed to be a lot shorter than that, but sometimes you don't really expect all of the turmoils that comes with the process, especially since it was my first project of this sort. And yeah.
Did you find it difficult to transition from being a programmer to being a game designer?
Not really. By that time, even though I wasn't designing games specifically, I was really in love with it. When I was playing games, I would often analyze the way the game worked and the pacing of the game. I would read books about game design. I would read articles, go on Gama Sutra, and watch GDC panels about the craft. So I feel like, obviously, I've learned a lot about game design over time, and as I did it more and more. But even at that time, I was internalizing a lot of that stuff because that was really a big passion of mine. For me, making games is very much about it's a little technical because it's not just a matter of I need to have the right story, but it's also how does the character control, how high can he jump, it's what is the most fun thing about your game, what is the most fun aspect, and then making sure that the game really makes that feature, that aspect shine through. And it's I find it really interesting to kind of dive into those elements, and I'm not. I've never locked myself into a single genre. My first game was an RPG. My second game was a racing game, tech support, adventure, simulation, which is something entirely different. I have a card game in the works right now. I have a management game. So I like to kind of explore all of these and kind of learn from every genre that I tackle. Take a little bit of this, bring it into these other genre, bring in what I've learned, and kind of innovate into all of these different things. And I think that's what keeps, for me, game design fresh and interesting and fun to pursue.
Yeah. So what would you say are your major influences? What games or developers inspired you to make your own stuff?
Sure. I love the story of id Software. There's a biography of the people who founded id, the people who made Wolfenstein and Doom and Quake, and they were some of the original indie developers. Back then, it was a small team. It was 7, 8 people over the course of half a year to a year to bring out Doom. Which is not unlike a lot of projects nowadays. I think nowadays the tools are a lot more elaborate, so the productions that come out of it are a lot more impressive.
Now you have Unity.
Yeah, exactly. We have Unity, we have Unreal, we have even tools like Photoshop and whatnot, which back in the day it wasn't that easy to, or digital cameras or anything like that. Like back then we needed to kind of figure out all of those technology a little bit more by hand and find the tricks to do it. And those guys did. Those guys, there was a lot of smart people that got together and managed to create these amazing games. And it's not just, as a game developer, I love the design, I love the programming, but I'm also interested in the field itself. Like I love the business aspect. I think it's interesting. And so looking at a company like id Software and understanding how it grew back in the day, I think it is really interesting. And it's interesting also to look at companies nowadays and see, okay, well, these people are doing this and they're managing, they're tackling these types of projects, these people are tackling these other types, and kind of, I think it's important for a game developer who wants to do this full time to not just consider, okay, I'm gonna make the best game out there, because it's a very crowded field. There's a lot of games, a lot of very talented people, a lot of amazing projects. So just making a great game, I don't think is enough nowadays. You need to have the hype. You need to have all of these other elements which will bring the people in. So yeah, I think that's kind of one of the things that I end up looking out to, especially when it comes to other companies and understanding how they function.
What are your favorite games?
I run the gamut. I'm a huge fan of retro games. There's a reason why my first title was a Japanese-style RPG, very reminiscent of the SNES era. Loved Chrono Trigger, loved Final Fantasy VI. Grew up with those titles. I love Doom. Doom, the original Dooms, I think, had fantastic level design, had a very quick pace, and very very in-your-face action. Doom 4, I think, did a great job with that as well, with in an era where there was a lot of cover shooters and a lot of defensive design. I think Doom 4 is very offensive. You move forward to kind of heal and that sort of stuff. Like, from a design perspective, obviously I'm often approaching it like this. Like, that's something that I absolutely love. A lot of interesting indie titles. Antichamber, which is a first-person puzzle game with non-Euclidean levels. So you move forward, and if you go back on your steps, well, the level might have changed. So it's all of these really interesting puzzles which you don't really see in a lot of other games, which I thought was interesting. And I would also name maybe as a final Slay the Spire, which is a card game, and it kind of inspired me to make my own card game as my next project. I feel like I find that a lot of my projects kind of start that way, where I look at a title and I go, oh, this is interesting. I want to see what my take on that is. So it's not a matter of, oh, I'm going to take this and I'm going to replicate what this game is. It's going to be some sort of foundation. Okay, I like this, I don't like this. Oh, this is a cool idea that I can add into that kind of approaches it in a different way.
Right.
Which was how a lot of my titles evolved. Some people have talked about my tech support and mentioned Papers, Please, for instance, and it's true. When I started tech support, I looked at Papers, Please, and that kind of, you get information and you have to, okay, is it correct? Why is it incorrect? But and that was kind of the starting point for tech support as well. But as I evolved, like, it became more about the conversations with the people. I tried to kind of broaden the scope of it, add more. It's all presented in this Windows environment. So okay, what can I do that's interesting? The types of software that you have access to, stuff that I can hide within it. So yeah, I feel like it'll always be difficult to kind of hone in on a specific thing, because I like to look at a lot of different titles, and even if a game is not great or top notch, there can often be some really cool aspect to it that you can go, okay, well, but it did this really well, so how can I use this, or maybe evolve this idea into something that's workable, into a bigger context.
It's interesting. So getting to tech support Era Unknown, can you describe it for someone who maybe doesn't know what it is?
Sure. So Tech Support Era Unknown is a game where you play the role of a tech support specialist. You have this Windows style environment, this operating system style environment. You have all of your software that you expect. You have email, web browser, all that kind of stuff. You have a chat window that allows you to communicate with customers. These customers have issues with their mobile phones. So you got to figure out, okay, how can I solve their issues? You can suggest to them that they turn it off and on again, for instance. You have a few bits of software as well that allows you to complete certain tasks. So as you move forward through the game, you can have access to new tools that will allow you to complete tickets easier, and the parameters to complete them are also going to change. So you're going to have warranties that will come in at some point. You'll have access to the customer database, and you'll have to validate a few things to make sure the customer is valid. Yeah, exactly. And all throughout that, you're working for this company, Quasar, who is getting attacked by a hacktivist group called Indigo. So you got to choose, okay, do I want to work with Quasar? Do I want to work with the hacktivists, or do something else entirely? The police gets involved, your brother needs money, so there's all of these threads that you can choose to pursue, which leads to one of, I believe, 23, 24 different endings. So
24 different endings.
There are a lot of different endings, there are a lot of threads to pursue, and the game kind of accounts for all of your actions, so it's not just at the end you make one or two decisions. It's really all throughout the game. The people who you choose to associate with, they will ask more of you. So you're kind of building these relationships, which kind of determine where you end up at the end of the game. Yeah.
Okay. So this show is very much about process. Can you sort of describe the process of creating tech support?
Sure.
From sort of idea to the completion.
Yeah. The first thing that I knew was that I knew that tech support was something that I would be building on my own. I knew that. So I I had just come off Astral Traveler, which was a project between me and a friend, and I was working on a few things, and I decided to take a small break from direct development, I guess, and I worked on some DLC for Arrowlight Core. And all the while, I was kind of trying to figure out what my next project was going to be. I knew that I would be working on my own. I'm not an artist, so I knew that it had to be visually something that I could execute that would be fairly simple. I knew that I would be using Unity. I had been using it on Astral Traveler, and I was very comfortable with the engine by that time, which really Unity allows you to do pretty much anything anyway, so that it was a perfect engine for that. And I knew that I wanted to have a theme that would stand out. My first game was a medieval themed, fantasy themed. The second one was a futuristic style racer. So I felt like in both cases that had hurt me. It hurt me, didn't stand out as much as it could have.
Okay.
So, I knew I was trying to figure out something that would be relatable, something that I could use, something that could be interesting to play, be different, something that would make people turn their heads, basically. And I stumbled upon tech support because everyone's had to deal with tech support, over the phone, and usually as customers. A lot of people have been tech support specialists as well. I could not have imagined how many people would come up to me later on and tell me, oh yeah, that's my job, and finding the game very recognizable.
Oh yeah.
So it all started with that theme. So tech support, what can I do with that? What is, how do I make the job of being a tech support specialist interesting? I knew that I didn't want to make a simulator. I didn't want it to be a simple, oh, you're going through your job and it's not super, motivating, which is kind of the, I think that's kind of how a lot of people view the job of a tech support specialist. So instead, what I wanted to do was kind of empower the player and say, okay, you're in control, and that's kind of what the story enables me to do, which is all these people, they all need your help, and you decide, okay, I'm going to help these people, I'm going to help these people, not help these people.
You get angry customers too?
Yeah, you get angry customers. That was a big part of the process as well, like creating a very realistic feeling amount of customers who would talk in different ways, would use different words. Some of them use emojis. Some of them have typos whenever they talk to you. So that was a big part of making that project kind of feel that it was coming to life.
Right.
So yeah, it kind of all built from there, and I felt that again I was inspired by Papers, Please, which I felt that it was kind of doing a little bit of the same thing. Customs agent, is that really an interesting job? On the face of it, not really, but it did interesting things with that. I like the whole detective aspect of it. You have all of this information. You kind of have to sort it out and figure out, okay, two people might be kind of saying very similar things, but it's all in the nuances. You gotta read between the lines. So I thought that had a lot of interesting potential, and ended up building a prototype which was very geared towards the operating system style environment. And I think that one thing that I really wanted was for it to feel very recognizable. So you have windows that you can resize and drag and minimize and maximize. Like all of these are very recognizable actions that you do in an operating system that I feel wasn't necessarily getting tackled a lot in games. So that's that's one more way of distinguishing it. There's a command prompt in the game which allows you to kind of go behind the scenes, look at all of your files. It's a little bit more technical, but for people who know computers, like it's very it's an interesting way of interacting with the system, I think.
Yeah.
And it was all about finding, like, even beyond the whole role of a tech support specialist, I think the fact that it was presented as a representation of a computer and of an operating system, like that allowed me a lot of interesting directions that I could pursue, and kind of a lot of nudges to real stuff that people have to deal with often.
Right.
Which was, it was a lot of fun to kind of research that and figure out where to go with those.
So how long was the development process?
I started work in October of 2017, and the game launched on February 27th, 2019, so about 18 months.
Yeah.
It wasn't a full 18 months because I did have other projects that ended up taking a few months, but I do this full time, so when I work, like, it's 60, 70, 80 hours a week, so that kind of balances out for the whole thing, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically you worked on making the game itself, and then I think you're partnered with a publisher for putting it out.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. How was the process of finding a publisher, and why did you decide to go with a publisher?
So first of all, my two first games did not perform very well. They very much underperformed, which is very unfortunate. That's kind of why I decided to go with the tech support theme, because I figured that it would be an easier way to get the attention of the press, get the attention of influencers, and I released the first trailer, I believe, in February or March of 2018, and it wasn't really picked up. People didn't really, there was, I didn't feel like the game was a problem. Nor the trailer, really. It's just a very crowded field.
Yeah.
The gaming field, indies, there are like 10,000 games being released every year. It's very difficult to compete against that. And it made me realize if I release this one on my own again, it's going to be a dud. It's going to be another dud. So I decided to go out, find a publisher with the express purpose of I need marketing help. Did some research, posted, sent out a pitch deck to 100, 150 different publishers. Got more than a few responses. I was very happy with the response rate. I think the fact that the game was different, felt different, really grabbed a lot of publishers' attention. And after a while, in early September, I signed with Iceberg Interactive, and we re-released the trailer that had already been released, and we kind of re-announced the game because no one had picked it up anyways. And immediately I saw a huge difference. I saw a huge difference in, I think we got picked up by PC Gamer at that time. Later on we would get Rock Paper Shotgun and other big productions. So it was nice to get that immediate justification of, oh well, I made this decision, and immediately it kind of paid off, which was really nice.
How is it? Do you mind if I ask how's the game doing so far? You launched you said earlier this year.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
It had a little bit of a rocky start because the game was released in English, but also in German and Chinese. It's a very language-heavy game. There's a lot of dialogue, a lot of procedural dialogue, so it's very, very complex. And I think those other languages had issues when we launched that we didn't necessarily discern at that time. We've worked hard to improve upon it and kind of provide a much better experience for everyone involved, as well as the regular kind of follow-ups that games require. So I think that the game definitely, I'm definitely happy with the way it went, but I do feel like, well, I know that I could have done a little bit better if those aspects had been a little bit more ironed out early on. So I think that's kind of unfortunate. The game released on February 27th. On February 28th, I was moving. So I was living in Quebec at that time, and I was moving to Montreal. It wasn't planned this way. I was supposed to move a month before, but there had been some issues, so I had to delay it. So I was the moving process took like 2 or 3 days, and we were packing stuff up, going to Montreal. And when I was in the hotel room in the evening, I was responding to people furiously, like, okay, this, and yeah, we're gonna look into that. Like, even on the day of release, like, I was trying to do my best to kind of keep on top of everything. Meanwhile, also moving all of my stuff to another place. It was it's not an ideal way of doing things. I wouldn't recommend it.
No, probably not.
But it's an interesting experience to say the least. And then once the moving process finished a few days ago, like I set up my computer and I went to work and kind of worked up on a lot of the stuff that people were kind of mentioning, and it was quite the process.
Okay, so maybe going from that is what is something you wish you'd known about game development before you started? Before you began this?
Marketing.
So
I knew. I think I definitely underestimated how much the value of marketing is and how important it is. And it's not even to say that I was complacent, because on Allied Core, I released 2 trailers. I went to PAX East. I had a Twitter account which I was very active on, and I was doing all of these things, and it didn't work out. And I was going through the same thing for tech support as well, So I think it's kind of very unfortunate to feel like, well, I'm putting all of this effort not only into the game, but also into the process of making the game known. But then there's these 10,000 other projects which are doing the same and competing, competing for attention. So I wish I had better internalized how not just how important, but how much actual effort and how much actual work is needed to make this work. They say, like, and there's a lot of online articles that mention, well, how to do marketing on a $0 budget, and they kind of paint this, well, you can do it too, and I don't know that it's actually that realistic. There will always be exceptions, and there are these amazing games that manage to skyrocket and just be the right project at the right time, and those will always exist. But I think that for the average developer, that's just not a very realistic situation. And as developers, we spend obviously a lot of time actually making the game and polishing it up and making sure it's the best project possible. And marketing ends up being 1, 2, 3 full-time jobs, outreach and creating the material and all of the related stuff. So and just stuff like going to conventions. Like you go to conventions, and it's very expensive. You need to produce, you need to travel, you need to produce some banners, you need to do all of these things, and at the end of the day, I think people overestimate the direct results of conventions. I think conventions it's great to be able to meet people, but I think as far as project viability is, that's not where the value is. The value is meeting other businesses and, you know, finding a publisher, finding a distributor, all of those opportunities that might arise from doing that. Or even finding influencers in media and whatnot. So, yeah, it's, you know, marketing there's a reason why I went with a publisher for this one, because it's definitely a lot of, it's not just a lot of work, but also the source matters. If I say a thing, it's not necessarily going to have the same outreach as if my publisher, who is well established and has all of these contacts, says the same thing. And when we re-released the trailer for tech support, I think that really crystallized that, because it was literally the same content, but suddenly it was said by the right person, which allowed the spreading of the word.
Yeah, that's the industry.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So you say you work really long hours. How do you integrate your work into the rest of your life, if you do? Or the other way around, how do you integrate your life into your work?
Yeah, I mean, if you do is the right way to put it. I don't think that I have much of a life outside of work at this point. I'm trying to get back on top of things. I'm trying to go out a little bit more, but quite frankly, like it's not usually or often possible. If I go out, it'll be more for work-related stuff. It'll be meeting people. It'll going to conferences. So yeah, it's I've recently started training, doing some treadmill running for half an hour 3 times a week. That's something that I've kind of do. That's like, as far as having an actual life, like that's not on the table right now. And it's one of the problems of being an indie dev, right? Like, and or having a business in general. When you have a business in general, like, you don't get paid unless the stuff that you're producing, the product ends up being very successful.
Yeah.
Unless you have angel investors and whatnot, that's another thing entirely. I think for indie devs who are doing this full time, like, that's one of the challenges that we end up having, where it's difficult to you need to make quite a large amount of sales in order to kind of recover all of that time that is being put in, and most game projects don't do that well. I saw a statistic just yesterday, which was more than 50% of studios only make one project, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's difficult to succeed. It's a difficult field to succeed. I'm at 3 projects at this point. So
that's something.
It says something. Yeah. My first ones didn't do well, and certainly did not sustain their expenses. But I've learned stuff, and I've learned more about being an indie dev and how to succeed. My third project was way more successful than my first 2, and I think my upcoming ones as well will kind of build upon that knowledge and hopefully be able to get to a place where it needs to be.
Well, a lot of times that's the value of mistakes and things that don't necessarily measure up to expectations, as long as you learn something from it.
Exactly. It's just very expensive learning.
Of course.
It's very expensive learning.
Well, I'm talking about sort of spiritual value than monetary value.
Yeah. It's it's very expensive life lessons, and it can be somewhat draining at times.
Yeah.
But if you manage to pull through, I think there are very, strong rewards at the end, and just seeing the reaction that people have been having to the various games, and tech support being the latest one, like, it's great to see that, and not only that, but I think there's a lot of respect that is built from what I'm doing and what I'm accomplishing, and I definitely see that from what people, how people are interacting with me. So that's really really good and really interesting as well moving forward for new project. Yeah.
How do you cope with stress and obstacles and that sort of permanent crunch you're in? Like
deal with
when
it.
something's not working.
You know what? Deal with it. Deal with it.
Yeah.
That's basically what it is. Like there's no magic formula. There's no I don't have a hobby that I specifically turn to that I do this and I unwind or anything like that. Like it really is okay, well, this new big problem happened and I'm, experience accounts for a lot. For my first project, like I've had I worked with a company which no longer exists, which is not surprising because I had contracted them for art and they produced some. It was very low quality and it was also like copied off of other sources, and that's a thing that ended up costing me $10,000. So, and that was one of the first things that I did.
Lesson.
Yeah, exactly. Expensive life lessons. That was one of the first things that happened on Airlight Core. And, it wasn't the only bad thing. Like, obviously, these projects, like, a lot, I've run the gamut. I've gone through everything. And I think, above everything else, like that's kind of hardened me. And when a new project, like sometimes there's going to be a lot of stuff that just happens to happen at the same time. It's just, well, can I catch a break, please? Because and it can be a little emotionally draining at times, but you deal with it. You deal with it, and you push forwards. And making games, being an indie game dev, that's what I want to do. That's what I set out to do, and I'm not gonna let life stand in my way in those things. So I just push through, and
That's, it's not a bad philosophy.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you ever get blocked? Do you just have like periods where you sit there and you don't know what to do? Yeah.
No.
No.
No. It's never like that. That's such a weird question, a weird answer, because I feel like a lot of people do, and I like writer's block, or I don't know. Like, of course, I'll have situations where I'll be faced with a problem and I don't know how to confront that specific problem, but I have like 12 different tasks to do. Right. So if I'm stuck with one thing, I'll just work on these other things while I ponder on this one problem. And I mentioned I was working on a card game, and I was it wasn't coming together the way I wanted to. Okay, how do I solve this problem? And I got stuck for like a month and a half. But during that time, I was doing other stuff. I was programming the actual engine because there are some fundamentals I knew would exist. And eventually, I just one morning woke up and said, "Aha! I can solve it like this." And then suddenly I had my answer, and I just moved forward. I think the fact that I tackle a lot of things, a lot of projects at once. I have like 3 or 4 going on right now. The fact that I have so many things going on at once means that I never really get stuck, because if one thing is a problem, or I'm waiting for something to happen, or I don't know how to solve a specific issue, I'll just turn to these other things which are equally important and which I need to do anyways, and I'll end up confronting those, and eventually I'll circle back and fresh mind, because I've been my mind was on other stuff anyway. So
how do you organize your tasks? Are you doing like a Scrum sort of organization?
The worst way possible. I have a Notepad document. I have tried so many things. I've tried Trello. I've tried Post-its. I've tried other systems, and none of them really worked. And what works for me is order through chaos. And I know what I need to do. I know what the tasks are, and because I work alone, like I had that luxury. Obviously, if I'm working with other people on other projects, we'll have a list of things to do, and we'll have all of these communications and all these things. But when I'm working alone, like if there's issues, I'll start listing them in a big notepad document, and then I'll just go through them, and I don't have a specific structure so much as I'm going with, okay, well, this I'm missing this thing right now to reach this point, so because I'm doing everything, I'm doing the design, I'm doing the programming, the art, like as I'm implementing a lot of things, I can get a feel for, oh, well, this is necessary in the short run because I need this for, to showcase the project to people, for instance. So it's not so much, I don't have a structure. It's just, I go with my heart. My heart is my way of structuring.
Well, I hope your heart is organized then.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I've released a few games already. So
apparently your heart works.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think I don't think other people would figure out how to work within the system that I have, but it works. It works great for me, and I feel like I have a very consistent mindset. So if I approach a problem in different time periods, I'm probably going to come to the same. I'll understand where I'm going for, what I'm going for. So because of that, like I feel like I might be a little disorganized from the outside, but from the inside, like
everything works.
Yeah, I follow the process more than I follow the information, perhaps. And because it's all a matter of the actual process, and A leads to B leads to C, like because I understand that process, the information that is scattered, but the process remains the same. So that allows me to get to the end of what I intend to.
That's good.
Yeah.
So do you have a favorite aspect of making games?
Oh, the design. I love game design. Like creating the design is kind of like a puzzle, and it's okay. I have this element and this thing, and how do I make these few elements work together? It really is what drew me in. On the onset, we were talking about why did I decide to work, as an indie dev, and that aspect of design and that creative freedom, and it's puzzle solving. It's puzzle solving where you want to bring out the most amount of fun out of the players. You want them to have the most fun possible, and in my case, I have limits because I don't necessarily have access to huge budgets. There's a time constraint. There's going to be asset constraint. I don't have access to billions of art pieces. So okay, how do I take all of these limits, and what is something that's fun that I can bring out of that? And I think that puzzle aspect and putting things together, and even like, okay, here's the thing. Oh, it's not great. It's boring. Okay, what can I do to make it better? Or conversely, well, this thing is really fun. Okay, well, how do I make everything work together with this thing?
Right.
Because that's the thing about game design, about good game design, is that you're not just implementing 4 different elements. They need to be talking with each other, and when they, the level design impacts the way your character is going to move, and the way character is going to move is going to impact the way you fight against your enemies.
Right.
So all of these things start to mesh together in a cohesive whole, and finding the way that cohesion works best is really what keeps me passionate.
Are you like a beginning, middle, or end type of person when it comes to a project? Do you have a favorite part?
The beginning, the early parts. Yeah, because the early parts, everything is fresh, it's new. It's a lot of discovery. I'm gonna make a 30-page game design document, and the end game is not going to be that. The end game is going to iterate upon that. Some stuff that I assume is going to work is not going to work out. So I think it's fun to have that. I love. One of my favorite things in games is the discovery, and I think the early parts is a lot of discovery of what the game actually is and when it wants to be, and the game kind of, as you start developing it, it guides you. It if you listen to it, it tells you, okay, this is a great direction. This doesn't really work out, and sometimes you set out to make something specific and you say, okay, this is what I want to make, and the game doesn't want to be that. It doesn't want to go into that direction. And when you start listening to the game and just okay, well, I'm going to go into this thing because that's what the game wants to be, then you end up discovering a lot of those elements. Later in the process, it's more about execution. Now you know what the game is, you know what it needs, so it's more programming and adding content and all that stuff, and that can be interesting in itself, but it doesn't have that visceral joy that I have from the design and the creative aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you have a least favorite aspect of making games? Something frustrates you?
Well,
I mean, we talk about marketing, but...
So I'm a programmer.
Yeah.
So programmers know that the last 20% takes 80% of the time. It's bugs, it's issues, it's unforeseen problems. People play it and, when you do these 4 obscure things, suddenly your game crashes. And okay, well, I'm going to figure that out now. It's always, because the thing about making games is that we fall into a rhythm of because we know the game, we're gonna do things always the same way, and then suddenly someone else plays who have no preconceived notions, so they play it entirely different, and suddenly it breaks everywhere, nothing works, and at that point it's kind of okay, I'm gonna repair this, and I end up with large lists of stuff to figure out, which can be it ends up, sometimes it's a little tedious, it's a little mindless, but that's also part of the process and part of the job, of course.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot, but do you have any more advice for people who want to start making games, who want to maybe be an indie studio as well?
Sure. I have a few pieces of advice. I don't think starting as an indie is a great idea.
Right.
Because I think that if you work with another studio, you will learn a lot. You will learn a lot about the process. You will be in touch with people who have a lot of experience, and you will be able to absorb that. And as you transition to your own projects, you'll be able to use that information and make something better out of it because of that. I would encourage people to start small. Don't start on your dream project, which is likely everyone has their big thing that is, it's going to have 1 billion characters and whatnot. Start small. Start with a project that takes that you expect will take 2 or 3 months to finish. Then a year later, when it's done, you'll have this, and you'll be able to move on to. You'll be able to take what you've learned on that and bring it to either your dream project or something else. Learn, do your research, go on the internet. I've been writing some articles about my own experiences as an indie game dev, as my first and second year as a full-time indie game dev, as well as a few other things. I have an article about dealing with publishers and whatnot. And these are all things that I kind of wish I had more of when I was starting off. I did do a lot of research, but I don't feel like I got the big picture necessarily, and I didn't necessarily have access to, because I think the internet has a lot of success stories, and people look at the big success stories and the big titles, and they go, "Oh wow, it's amazing. We can make these." And the reality is, most people will fail, and the failure rate is absolutely massive. 80 to 90% of games don't make back their money. So I think those failure stories are really important. You can learn a lot out of them. So that's kind of what I'm trying to put out as articles, is kind of a balance between, okay, this is why I've done this, and it doesn't always paint the best picture, but it paints a very realistic picture, and it shows how much I've grown as well, how much I've learned, and why how I perform better nowadays as opposed to before.
Right.
And I think it's important to kind of share that information, pass it onwards, and I encourage people to do the same when they have failed as well and find themselves in a successful situation.
Okay, so I think we're at the point where I'm going to ask you, how can people find out more about you and about your games?
I'm on the internet! So,
That's helpful.
Yeah. So, my company is Dragon Slumber, and so you can find everything that I've done on dragonslumber.com. I do Twitch streaming of game development on Twitch, which is at twitch.tv/dragonslumber, and I do that on every day of the week. I have a Twitter, which is dragon_slumber, I believe.
Okay. We'll have links to all of this in the
There you go. It's all down below, I assume.
Yeah.
There you go. Look at that. It's all there.
Pretty much, yeah.
And yeah, go check out Tech Support, which is at techsupportgame.com. That's the most recent release. It's the title everyone's talking about, and you should be talking about it too.
What platform can they find it on?
It's on PC, Mac, and Linux. All of my games thus far have only been PC, Mac, and Linux. But
is it like on Steam or something?
It's on Steam, yes. Yeah. But I'm branching out for my upcoming projects. So yeah, very excited to kind of check out other stuff like consoles and whatnot. Yeah. Or mobile.
Should be fun.
Yeah. So
all right.
Yeah.
Well then, thank you, Kevin.
It was lovely. I enjoyed this.
Good. Thank you, everybody, for watching. This has been Everyday Expertise. I'm Angela.
I'm Kevin. Peace out.
Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this interview. Be sure to share this video with friends and colleagues who may also enjoy this topic. Let us know your thoughts by leaving a comment below or check the description for our social media. See you next time.